Hi, and welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered discussion related to health and healthcare. My name is Amy.
And my name is Sarah.
And we are your podcast hosts. So just remember, we have our Gritty Nurse apparel line. You can find us at www.grittynurse.com. Please join the conversation, make a statement, and go to our website.
And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or any other podcast listening platform, be sure to hit subscribe so you can get updates to when we release episodes. Also, be sure to rate and review us. You can also find us on Patreon. We are at Patreon at the Gritty Nurse Podcast. We just wanted to let you know that any donation you make, however big or small, is going towards supporting our monthly podcast costs, which include podcast hosting, our website, audio equipment that we use, and also the time and energy it takes us to research and put out good quality episodes for you guys.
We are gathered here today with one of our favorite guests. I'm so happy he's back. Matthew!
Yay, Matt!
Yay! Hi, guys.
Hey, Matt.
For those of you who don't know, Matt was on our show back in July, I think. And it's been a while, but I feel like literally it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I know it wasn't.
Yeah, it honestly feels like that. It does.
We're just happy to have you. And I think this will be a really great episode for nursing students, and not even just for nursing students. I mean, I think anybody can take these same principles and apply them to their practice. And I think once you get to tell your story, Matt, like I think it's so important for people to know, even as a student, you were able to do something which most people are really afraid to do. But why don't we just kind of jump right into it, Matt? So why don't you tell us a little bit about the experience that you had as a nursing student on a unit and what you saw, what you did, the whole kind of gambit.
So being in these clinical settings for me is just kind of like, it's a bit of a home away from home, because I'm a little bit more comfortable than a lot of other students are, having 11 years backing me at this point. So but I'm not the type of person to just kind of walk around, and pretend that I know everything. I'm more than willing to ask questions. I'm more than willing to be taught. I enjoy it. I actually enjoy the whole thing about being taught by other nurses. So I was shadowing a nurse, and she went to go get something, and we were standing at the nurse's station, and she was walking towards me, and another nurse was walking in the same direction, and she was looking in my direction and not looking straight, and she ended up walking into the nurse that I was shadowing. Instead of actually just saying I'm sorry or excuse me, she actually kind of nudged her with her arm and said for her to get out of the way. And the nurse that I was shadowing was like, "No, you walked into me. You weren't even looking where you were going, and you're telling me to get out of the way." And this whole thing just turned into, like, it went from 0 to 100 real quick. So I'm standing there watching this. At first, I thought it was a joke, because like I'm just assuming that these people are friends. That was clearly not the question. She had made some comments saying, this is not the first time you've treated me this way. This is not the first time you've even like touched me or like been physical around me, and like this is unacceptable. You can't act this way. If you don't want me to work here, I don't have to. I come here onto this unit to help you guys because you're all so short. And then she kind of just like stormed off. So I went after her, my preceptor, and I asked her if she was okay, and she was like, "No, I'm not okay." And she was explaining to me, like, a couple of days ago, that same nurse and a couple of others were off in the corner snickering and looking at her, and she's like, "What are you laughing at?" And they had made some like joke, but I guess because she's not really their friend, as I'd mentioned, or she doesn't know them that well, it doesn't really come off as a joke to her. It's just cruel. So I believe that there was some tension there, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were some other things that had happened. So she was explaining to me some of the stuff that had happened, and she was like, she said she pushed her. I'm not going to use that word because that's not what I saw. I saw it like a nudge. Like, I don't know if it was
it like a hard nudge, like just more than just being friends, you think?
it seemed more like a reflex actually. Like she was just kind of like she was moving because I guess she was trying to brace herself.
Right.
Um, it didn't seem like it was malicious, but her tone when she told her to get out of the way was the problem for me. Um,
So did
I
she
mean,
like so
hmm,
Matt, did she like kind of like I'm trying to kind of envision it. So like you were walking with your preceptor. Like was your preceptor on the left or the right of you?
I was standing. My preceptor
Okay.
was walking towards me, and the other
Was wa-
woman was walking. Um, they were intersecting.
Okay. And what did was it like her elbow, her arm? Like what actually brushed into the your preceptor's body? Like what
I
was it like
think the
full on body check? Like
no, well, they collided into each other. So like her whole body collided into her, but like I think her I want to say like her maybe her right arm was like on her stomach. Like maybe she was rubbing her stomach or something and like it like moved. Like her arm moved and then like she kind of just moved it away, like moved her away.
wow.
Okay.
Like she full on hit her with her like she full on walked into her first and then she did that with her arm.
Oh, so
And
there
she
was like
like
two interactions. It was
yeah, like
the
she collided into her and then she kind of like nudged her with her arm.
Okay.
And instead of saying, "I'm sorry," like she kind of just she moved her body and said, "Get out of the way." When I had as I was speaking to my preceptor at the time, she was like, "Yeah," she had pushed me. I'm like, "Yeah, I did see that she nudged you." I was like, that wasn't right." And she was like, "You saw that she pushed me. You have to go tell her." And I'm like, "Excuse me?"
oh no.
Awkward. Awkward.
She's like, "Yes, you have to go back up to the nurse's station and you have to tell her." I'm like, "I'm gonna go consult my teacher now." So she storms back up to the nursing station and I can overhear her. She's like, "The nursing student saw you push me. The nursing student saw
God.
you push me." And she's like, "Well, where is he? Where is he?" So I find my teacher like in a corner somewhere writing her notes about us, and like I'm like, "Hey," she's like, "Hey, I see you found me." I'm like,
She was
yeah.
hiding.
Well, yeah, because she was like, "I'm just trying to find a minute." Well, she was like, "I'm just trying to find a minute to write my notes about you guys." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "I'm so sorry." I'm like, "I there's a bit of a snafu that I need to discuss with you."
Right.
Um, and she's like, "Okay, what had happened?" So I explained the same situation to her, and she's like, "Well, that definitely is a snafu." She's like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" And I'm looking at her like, I need guidance. And "Well, I guess I do have to like go up there and talk to them and tell the truth." I'm like, "But do I have to?" And she's like, "No, not really."
Well, I mean, they kind of put you on the spot, right? You just happen
Yeah,
to witness this, and all of a sudden you're being dragged into this drama that you know nothing about, and really, it's you're a student. Like, that's not in your
exactly.
description.
Exactly. Like I'm here to learn. I'm not here to deal with like the sixth grader attitude. So um I'm like, do I have to? She's like, "No, not really." And as you said, she's like, they kind of put you on the spot and that's not fair. And if you'd like, I can go up there and I'll tell them this is not happening. I'm like, "No," I'm like, to be honest, I don't think it's right that she just walked into her, didn't apologize, and nudged her. And the fact that she stood there and argued and was like, "No, I didn't walk into you. You walked into me." I was like, "I think that it's like this is bullshit." And she was telling me that this same nurse has picked on her before. And I was like, "Oh, all right, I'm gonna go do the right thing." And my professor's like, "Okay, well," um, she's like, "Just to let you know, if things start to," she's like, "I'm gonna come up there with you. If things start to get hairy, I'll pull you right out of this." I'm like, "Thank you, I appreciate it."
Okay.
So I walk up there and I round the corner and I walk into the nursing station and my nurse is on one side, the other nurse is on the other side with two other nurses and they're talking in hushed tones.
Yeah.
Um, and I say to my nurse, I'm like, "Hey," and she like quickly turns around and goes, tell them what you said to me." And I was like,
Oh god.
I'm like, why are you so dramatic?
This is
So
coming
I'm
from
like,
you.
right? So I'm like, okay. I'm like, I think I said under my breath, I'm like, so we're not going to talk about this first? Okay. So the other nurse turns around and she looks at me, and I don't know this woman. I don't know how old she is. She seems a little bit more juvenile than me. Um, she got up, looked me up and down, kind of walked over with a bit of swag and was like, "So you're saying I pushed her?" I'm like, "That's not what I said." And she's like, "That's what she said." I'm like, "Yeah, that's not what I said though." I'm like, "You were walking um, in an intersecting you were walking in an intersecting way, and you weren't even paying attention to where you were going. As a matter of fact, you were looking in my direction, and you walked into her and you nudged her with your arm, and instead of saying sorry, you told her to get out of the way." She's like, "That's not what happened." I'm like, "That's actually what happened." She's like, "No, it didn't. Like, this happened 5 minutes ago. Like, it's not that it's not fresh." She's like, "So you're saying I pushed her?" I'm like, "No, I said you nudged her." She's like she's like, "No, you're saying I pushed her." I'm like, No, I actually said you nudged her." I'm like, You said you pushed, sorry, you said that you used the word push. That's your language. I'm not using that word. So I said you nudged her. Like, but more importantly, I also said that you should have just said sorry." And she's like, "No, no, I don't," like, she's like, "I don't know who you are." I'm like, "I'm the student who watched this happen." And she was like, "You know what?" She's like, "You can't come up here." I'm like, "No, you know what?" I'm like, "To be quite honest, I came up here in a leap of faith to say my piece and say what I saw. I said what I saw, and what I saw was what she experienced." I'm like, "This actually is between the two of you and not me. I'm the student, as I had just said. So I'm going to wash my hands clean of this whole debacle, and I'm going to walk away from it." And she's like, "You can't walk away from me." I'm like, "Watch me." And then I did.
And you should have inserted there, bitch, but you didn't. How nice of
I
you.
couldn't. My teacher was watching.
Oh,
So Amy knows me well enough. Yeah. I walked off, and my teacher like grabbed me and pushed me into like the supply closet and was just like, "You handled that very well." And I was like, "I think I could have been a little bit nicer." And she's like, "No." She's like, "You weren't even being mean." She's like, You told her exactly what you saw. You wouldn't let her use change the language of what you were saying. You know, she started to get really, really excited, and my teacher was like, "I thought that she was going to hit you or push
Oh
you
my
or
god.
something." I'm like, "I didn't think that she was going to do that, but I did see her like starting to while out a bit, and that's why I was like, I need to leave." And my teacher's like, "I think you noticed it and realized that this conversation was going nowhere,
Right.
and you
mhm.
just walked away." And she's like, "And then you just shut it down. Like, you didn't argue with her. You said, 'Watch me leave.' And you left. And as she was talking, you didn't even turn your head." I'm like, "No, I didn't even bat an eyelash either."
So, okay, so while this is all happening, right, is everybody looking at you at the nurses station? Because you said there were a couple other nurses that were already there.
Yes.
So it kind
Yeah,
of
they
was like a
were
scene.
a little bit like the other students were somewhere else actually. They were all in their other rooms tending to their patients like we're supposed to be.
Right.
And the other nurses were kind of just I think like the secretary was there, and the other nurses were also around doing whatever. Um, but what ended up happening was that same nurse that that walked into mine went downstairs to go get the manager and complained. So then, like about 30 minutes later, I get called into the manager's office, and she's like, "I'm just trying to figure out what had happened." She's like, uh, "So I'm there now with my professor and those two nurses," and she's like, "Can you just tell me what had happened?" And I'm like, "Sure." So I explained the situation to her, and then I explained what had happened when I said what I saw. And she's like, "Okay." And that was basically it. Um, I don't know what happened. Like, I I think if I have seen her since then, I haven't really paid much mind to her. I haven't seen my preceptor since then, and I know that she doesn't typically work on that floor. Like she just floated in for a minute because they needed the help. But like if she doesn't go back, I wouldn't be surprised because like that was some straight up bullshit.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't blame her either, right? Like, I mean, we were laughing and kind of because some elements, and I think it's just the way you tell a story. It's kind of funny, but
Hmm.
thinking about like the fact that this went down, it's crazy. And I think for anybody for 1 second that's like, oh yeah, there's no instability in nursing or there's no bullying. Come on, like
Oh Jesus. No, there's so like I've seen a lot of things happen.
and we know it happens. Maybe it happens less frequently in certain environments than others, but we know it's almost like people try to make it like a rite of passage, and it's nonsense. Like there's no reason that older nurses should be eating their young. Like we should really be building people up, encouraging people and showing them the way because at one point in time in your life, you were a student too, right?
Hmm.
And you know what?
Absolutely.
I think I think it's just we have to call it out. So
Well, I mean, like the only thing I can really think of, unless there's something I actually just can't remember now. The only thing I can think of is when my teacher and I spoke to my nurse after my preceptor, and she actually started to cry because she was recanting that like this isn't the first time this has happened here,
Right,
and
right.
um, that kind of touched me because I was like, that's not right. Like part of our job is to care, and we can't even care for each other.
I
yeah.
know it's kind of
Like
ironic,
it's
right?
yeah, absolutely. Like I understand, you know, that we're all feeling burnout right now. Um, it's it's been a really, really hard year. But to start attacking each other is when we know like our elements are starting to get compromised.
This is to me it sounds like this is something like your preceptor was saying that was going on for a long period of time. And the fact
Hmm.
that she didn't feel comfortable enough to one voice her her anxiety or her stress about this one particular person speaks volumes again about the environment that was able to create a situation like that happening in the first place, right? Because I mean there's no room for anybody to be walking around bumping, nudging anybody and then telling them to get out of their way. Like that is just
Absolutely.
Hmm.
like that should not be happening.
I kind of feel like this is a situation where your preceptor felt desperate, right? Because I think about the relationship between a preceptor and her student. And it's always like the preceptor needs to be in control and in charge, know what's happening, and guide you, right? And she kind of turned the tables on you because she felt so desperate about the situation. She needed you. She really physically needed you to vouch for her because this had been happening for so long. That's kind of how I see it. And
Mm.
I guess, she just it didn't matter anymore that you were her student. You were just that person that saw what happened and she needed you to support her because nobody else was.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what, like I hear that. Like it probably did come out of desperation. It I think that if I was one of the younger students, I may have, well, you know what, I can say me as a younger me, I wouldn't have been so comfortable saying what I had said. I probably would have said, no, I'm not going to do that because I don't think that this has anything to do with me. When, like, yes, it doesn't really have anything to do with me, but like the grand scheme of things, like if this is going on, like as Amy had said, like it needs to be pointed out. Like we need to start blowing whistles. And sometimes these are our friends, but like you don't have to be a dick. Like
Mhm.
I'm at work with people 8 hours a day. It used to be 5 days a week, but like I made it a point to just not be just this crotchety old nurse to one patients and three like my colleagues. Sorry, two of my colleagues. Like it's not why. Like I have to be stuck with you guys all day, almost every
Yeah,
day.
Mhm.
Why make that um, uncomfortable for not just me but other people?
I ask myself that every day. Like, why do people turn around that have been bullied in the past and just do it to other people. Like I kind of feel like I would never do that. If I ever do that, please call me out on it. But it's like my mission in life to just spread positivity. And whether or not something happened to you, you don't need to turn around and inflict that pain on someone else.
Absolutely.
Think about it. You're spending almost more time with these people than your own family. Like,
Yeah.
So
so
true.
let's unpack the whole like nursing cliques. We've all seen it, right? Where it's just like, okay, so those are the Jamaicans. There's the Africans. There's the South Asians. Or there's the new grads. They're all pocketed into all these various different sections. Or like you get like I remember getting on one of my shifts and being like, "Oh, those are this particular line doesn't talk to people that come in from a different line." And I was like, "What?" And I remember working a whole 12 hours without having one nurse like even look at me. Like they wouldn't tell me when my break was. They withheld patient information from me. I had a delivery. They didn't want to come in to relieve me for the delivery or to even let me know that someone else was coming to relieve me. Like they were like the worst people. And all this does is it harms patient care. I don't care what anybody says at the end of the day. Like you said, Matthew, instead of taking care of patients and making sure they're getting what they need, there's these two nurses that have to deal with their own personal stuff before they can deal with the patient stuff. And how can that
Yeah.
not go down to the patient?
Exactly. Like they're out there by the nursing station, just literally wasting time arguing with each other about something silly. And really, like when I was talking to my teacher about it, I'm like, honestly, like this really just deserves an apology. That's it. And it's not like that's free. It's
Mhm.
not the worst thing that like you can do. It's not embarrassing to apologize to somebody, especially about something like that. Like I understand that, yeah, maybe it is a little bit uncomfortable because like, she wasn't paying attention, but like, come on, we're adults, and you're in a professional setting.
Absolutely. And I think that that's so important that you said that. Like it really I think that whole situation could have been turned around with a oops, sorry, I didn't see you, my bad. And the whole thing would have unplayed differently. Maybe not because they've had these interactions, but I think the fact of the matter is that's true. And an apology could have made a world of a difference. So you're a student, you're kind of put in a this type of position. What made you decide to speak up, to say something?
It was kind of the right thing to do. Well, it was the right thing to do. I didn't think it was fair that that happened, and I saw like I I kind of assumed that there might have been some sort of, I don't want to use the word bullying, but I don't know, some interaction between them and maybe some other nurses don't like my nurse. Um, and I think that made it a little bit more apparent when I walked up there and, there were the three of them were speaking in hushed tones while my nurse was sitting there documenting, like they were gossiping. And I remember even after that, one of my peers who's actually buddied up with that nurse had said like she just wouldn't stop talking about the situation afterwards.
Yeah.
So the
So I
nurse
just
that
felt
ran
like,
into your nurse?
yeah,
Okay.
was talking about it afterwards. So I just felt like, it's the right thing to do to just come up and just tell the truth. It made me really uncomfortable because there was no plan. It was just, I felt like I was pushed into a tank of sharks. Um, but like, I kind of just quickly realized who I was myself. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not 19 and these people don't scare me. So.
So what do you say to like that 19-year-old student nurse? Like how do we encourage them to have these bold or it shouldn't even be a bold conversation, but like what would you say to them from your like nursing student perspective?
It's okay to speak up. It
Yeah.
it does seem very, very scary and it does seem alarming. And you know what? If somebody doesn't like you because you told the truth, that's their problem, not yours.
Right.
You like it's not a whole situation where you're just a rat. Um, these situations at work, they do affect our patients, and that is dangerous. So if it's something that, you can pull these two people aside and be like, listen, guys, you don't have to like each other, but you do have to be civil here at work, and you do have to work together. Like, hug it out and go, cool. But if you can't do something like that and you need to go say maybe to management and say, hey, like this situation happened, you can do that as well. Like it could remain anonymous, but I would say always speak up, always talk your truth. I mean, it I don't know why you wouldn't do something like that in your workplace.
Well, and I think
Absolutely.
it gets easier, right? So the more you do it, it just becomes more natural to you. And as Amy and I were
Hmm.
saying in previous episodes, sometimes it just requires practice. Like even if you know something is coming, we would say like practice in front of the mirror. If this is someone that you deal with every day and you need to have a comeback and you're not good at this, like I'm not good at this kind of thing. I hate confrontation, but just
Hmm.
practicing and then actually just doing it and
Absolutely.
just think about what the worst case scenario is, and if it's not as bad as you think it is, then just go for it.
Yeah, I have
Ab-
I have another question for you, Matthew. So one of the things I used to see a lot too, and it happened to me as a nursing student, is so you're a nursing student, you have your preceptor, you go to do something or something has been done and there's an error, but the error is not yours and it's actually the error of the nurse who is precepting you. But they dump the shit on you and be like, "Oh, who's my nursing student? What do we do?"
Um, I would say you can challenge that. So I think that the beauty of technology now is that a lot of the times when you're documenting, you have to log into your own username. So it tells you who documented what. So if there's an error, especially if it's been documented, we know who it is. But if you're in a situation and that's not like there's, I guess, no paper trail, and the nurse is like, well, it was the
Like
student.
your word is the nurse. Yeah.
I mean, it's at that point, it's your word against them, theirs. You can sit down, you can have a discussion with your um, clinical instructor about this, and you can have this discussion with your clinical instructor, that nurse, and maybe the manager, and I mean, I wouldn't say really go above and beyond that, but I think that a conversation is warranted there, because that's a lie. Like, why would you lie about this? Like, if you made the error, just fess up and say, yeah, actually, that was my fault. I mean, why blame the student just to kind of, I don't know, like, if it did someone die?
And so usually the situation is no. It's usually nothing very significant, but I think it's just
Yeah,
important that you. This is where I think it's so important that you document what you do, and if you didn't do it,
yeah.
don't document
It
it.
never happened.
Yeah,
Like, but
no,
that's what we're taught in school. Like, if you didn't do it, it never happened. So make sure you document it. So that's why, like, in nursing, it's like document, document, document. I swear, they just every day, it's like they start off our day with, okay, guys, did you document? Like, it's annoying. But like it saves you. It saves you from, situations like this, or situations where, and God forbid it ever happens to anyone, where you get like subpoenaed into the courtroom and they're like, this happened, and you're like, well, it says right here that I documented at this time that never happened. So you tell me.
right, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So let me ask you guys: is this incivility? So incivility, I guess the explanation for that is like rude behavior, like being like rolling of the eyes. Would you classify
Hmm.
it as incivility, or would you classify this as bullying?
I mean, what's like, I kind of feel like rude behavior can be bullying. I feel like, well, no, I feel like the body language with the rolling of the eyes can be as well. So why aren't they just both the same thing?
I kind of see it as a spectrum. Like incivility could be something that's a little bit less severe, I guess, than bullying, but
Then bullying,
I
yeah.
see bullying as sort of targeted towards one person and it's ongoing and it's not warranted. Where I guess incivility, it could be something that happened and both people are, rude to each other. But I feel like bullying is more one way. There's the person that's doing the bullying, and then there's the person who is being bullied. But
Right.
it
Hmm.
could be both. You're right. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Maybe I'm just thinking of this situation in and of itself because there's a bit of history there. So I'm like, is this bullying or is this like incivility or is it both?
Yeah, that's kind of where I want people to really understand what the terms may be like. And I think you're right, Sarah, where you're saying it's kind of like a spectrum. And then also the other compounding factor is the I think the frequency and how often this one person is doing these aggressions towards you. So yes, there's been times where I have been working with someone and they said something or they did something and I might have rolled my eyes or whatever. So yeah, that would be considered incivility. But if I continue doing that to that person and when they came around, I was like, oh, here comes that dumbass nurse, or like those little things, or I'm
Hmm.
talking about that. That's now targeting that person where I feel that though that behavior that I was doing previously is now starting to turn into harassment, turning into bullying.
Yeah.
I think that's where when you're targeting someone, it's bullying. So I feel like incivility is those little things that you might do, but you're not doing it consistently to one person. Whereas bullying and harassment, you're targeting that person, you're doing that behavior, you're doing incivility types of behaviors over and over and over towards that one particular person. So
So bullying would be that time you chased me up the stairs when we were kids with a ruler beating me.
Matt, I love that you brought this up.
so listen,
Screaming, I'm Zebo, I'm Zebo, I'm Zebo.
How old were you guys? I'm so curious now.
so Matthew could have been maybe around 9, maybe younger.
I was probably 8 or 9. So you were probably 12 or 13.
So this is back in the days when the show Are You Afraid of the Dark was on. Did
Oh,
you
I
watch
love
that,
that
Sarah?
show. I
In
absolutely love that show. Yes, yes.
Sarah, this was in Amy's Duppy house. This was in the haunted house Amy used to live in.
Oh, the one that she talked about in our ghost stories episode. Got
Yes,
it.
yes.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I think I think what you did, Matthew, is really important. And I think calling it out, like, I mean, I think it was so courageous because I think most people would see it and be like, "Oh, nope, I'm not going there with a 10-foot pole." And like, you didn't
Yeah,
have to, right? You had the option where your clinical instructor gave you an out. She's like, "You don't have to do this." Like,
yeah,
you just kind of bow out, and you're like, "No, like, this is just the right thing to do." Like, if it was me, I really wouldn't want this to happen to me. And I don't want this to happen to my colleagues. Like, really, when you're going into work, and especially when you're going into working as a nurse, you have to be a team. Like, I can't imagine. And I've been in that situation, but it's just like you want to be in a cohesive team. So you know what's going on with your patient. They know what's going on with your patient. It's like your second family because you're spending so much time.
hmm,
What I remember going in on some shifts where with some of these nurses, and they were the best. Like I would be looking forward. I was like, oh man, I'm going in with these nurses. We're gonna have a good time, and it was a blast working with them. And I think that's
hmm.
how it should be every time. They had your back. Like you knew if there was an emergency, they're like, oh, cord prolapse. Everyone's running in, hands on deck. We're helping the patient, high-fiving each other because we saved someone's life, we saved a baby, and then we ordered takeout. Like, I mean, what was better than that? But
Absolutely.
then you have those situations where it's just like you don't want to be there, you don't want to work there, you're by yourself, it's depressing, and the hospital system perpetuates it and allows it to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think especially even in leadership, it's like these people who commit microaggressions, not only do they not only does nothing happen to them, but it's almost like they're rewarded for this behavior because no one says anything and they just end up in their same position or they move up because they they surround themselves and they align themselves with the right people. I almost feel like sometimes it's like being on Survivor. It's all about alliances. It's not actually about the work. And just going back to, the team that you work with, I remember, like, how sometimes you would look at the schedule to see who was working when you are, and it's either like you breathe a sigh of relief or you're like, oh, I don't want to go into work. It just changes the whole mood of your entire shift and the whole team dynamic and how everybody works together and how everybody feels after they're done their shift. Never mind the actual work you're doing with your patients.
Absolutely. I say to those managers out there that are looking at their scheduling and they're like, "Oh man, we have so much sick calls, blah blah." Maybe look at your staffing complement, your ratios, who you're setting people to work with. Maybe there's
Hmm.
racism there. You might want to fix that. Maybe it's your culture. You know, there's probably a lot going on there. But I think out of all of this, we just need to be kind to each other. We need to be civil to one another. We need to treat people with respect and dignity. And I mean, you can not like somebody, but still treat them as a human being. I think we can't lose sight of the fact that you're still working with another human being and you need to treat them with respect and dignity. When you leave and you're in the parking lot, that's a whole other thing.
Well, you know, you're still on hospital property,
I'm
so
joking.
let's bring the brawl onto the sidewalk, Amy. Uh, no, but like you're absolutely right. Like it's just I've said it so many times, especially in interviews, where they bring up the questions about conflict resolution, and I'm like, you know, the reality of the situation is you're not gonna like everyone you work with,
Hmm.
and that's fine. They're not gonna like not everyone's gonna like you. That's okay. Like you're not there to be everyone's best friend. And when people say things like, I don't come to work to make friends, well, no, you come to work, but like making friends does make your life a lot easier at work.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and if you're not friends with these people at work, cool, but just be cool with them at work. Like if you find that you know, this person is lazy, I mean, you know, you could talk to them about it, but you also don't need to be a dick about that.
Yeah.
Like
There's a way
you
to get
could,
the message
yeah,
across.
there's
I agree.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, I mean, and again, like if situations don't change, then I think that that's where you go into going into a step above and speaking to a team leader or speaking to management after that. Like, I mean, it's just, but you don't have to sit there and squabble and fight. Not at work. Do
Yeah.
that somewhere else.
And you definitely don't have to take the fact of the matter of being bullied at work either. I think there's a lot of different ways to deal with that. Like you said, there's actually now some organizations have reporting systems where you can actually write in discrimination, harassment, racism, all sorts of different things into the internal reporting system. And you could report these incidences and track them. And again, I think we've had episodes where, like, if you're having this happening, start taking notes. Start
Yeah.
documenting these interactions and what was said and what was exchanged, because you will need to it might come to a point where you have to it comes to a head and you have to, like, you have to take it higher than the manager. Maybe it goes to the director, maybe it goes to HR. Like, I mean, and again, we said HR is not your friend, but I think at the end of the day, like, if you feel that you're ever being harassed or you're being abused, there's a lot of different avenues to go to. There's ombudsman that you can go to. There's your union if you're a unionized worker. There's a lot of different avenues, and then if it comes to a point where you have to lawyer up,
Hmm.
be like, I'm done. I'm done dealing with this type of behavior. Like, I don't think anybody should ever have to sit back and be in a situation where they're so distraught about work that it makes them sick to go there.
Yeah, well, I've been in that.
Yeah, and one thing that I would say to nursing students is that usually when someone is unkind to you, you often blame yourself. You blame yourself first before anything else when 95% of the time you have done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to remember, especially if you're new and you're not very sure of yourself, is usually you need to look at it as it's not personal. It's that other person's problem if you're being bullied or they're being uncivil to you. As long as you aren't, projecting that same behavior back to them, it's usually not you, it's the other person. It's just about how can you move forward if this is a situation that you can't really get out of, like you're working together all the time. How can you work together and, not feel that way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always that conversation that you could have. Like, I think if it came to the fact that, they were switching your line or whatever the case may be, I still think there should be a conversation that's had with that person who's actually causing you this grief, because sometimes rarely, they actually don't know that they're being this way
Yeah,
too, right?
that's
Hmm.
true.
But
That's true.
I think conversation still should be had to say, hey, this is how you've made me feel. This is how I feel, and let your voice be
And I
heard.
mean, like sometimes, no, you're right. Like, cause you know me, Amy. I like to joke around a lot, and everyone at work knows that I'm like that too. And I come off very, very sarcastic. And if people don't know me, they'll think that I'm being rude. So there are times where I have to like, randomly like set out a trigger warning and just be like, PSA guys, I'm just joking. Like, I love you all. Let me order us lunch, which I won't do, but like I'll say it.
Oh my goodness. Well, I commend you, Matthew. Like, I think what you did was really great, and I think we need to stand up for each other, and we need to look out for those people who might not be willing to say something. And I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. You taught me a lot.
Thanks for coming on the show again. We always appreciate doing an episode with you.
Thanks for having me, you guys. I love talking to you guys.